Let's go ahead and get started here. So first, thanks to everybody for your time this morning. I'm Jan Menon with the Connecticut Charter Schools Association, and we are here for a webinar on budgeting and financial planning. This webinar was one of several that we've offered to tackle key topics for charter schools, especially during this time of the pandemic. So we're really excited to have this webinar. And before we dive in, I just wanted to provide a quick update on the advocacy side. So folks might know that the Connecticut legislature has gone into special session. So the House is in chambers today. We expect that the Senate will be in chambers by this coming Tuesday. And the main topics are around police accountability and transparency, and easing restrictions on absentee ballots heading into the August primary and November election. So action today, action next week. We as the association are staying in this and being very active to make sure that there aren't any cuts to the charter line item. So we're keeping a close eye on what's going on in special session. And all this time up until now, and we'll continue this work, we've been doing a lot of virtual touches with legislators in the form of meetings and letters. They've been going really well, and we are going to continue that work. So if your school community hasn't met virtually with your delegation and you'd want to do that, just let us know. You can pop into the chat and let us know, or you can reach out to us separately. We'd love to coordinate that. So without further ado, we're going to introduce Raj. So I'm excited to introduce Raj Thakkar, founder and CEO of Charter School Business Management. Now, that's a name you might be familiar with because these folks are a national provider of accounting and finance back office support and training for charter schools and CMOs. So these folks have seen a lot. They have seen budgets and finances of all shapes and sizes. I've had the pleasure of knowing Raj for the last several years, and I have personally seen the work of his group firsthand, and they really have extensive experience. They've worked with charter schools, charter support organizations, CMOs, and charter authorizers, among the many. So they pretty much have seen it all. And so I'm really excited to turn this over to these folks to talk about what they do and how it could help apply in Connecticut. So Raj is also currently editing his first book on the 10 components of responsible financial management of charter schools and aims to have it published later this year. And so today he's going to present some guidance and recommendations on finance, budgeting, and forecasting in this world that we're living in, this time of the pandemic. So following the presentation, we'll field questions in the Q&A feature, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen. We've got the chat, we've got the Q&A. As with prior webinars, we're going to record this and make the recording and materials available on our website at ctcsa.org. So with that, I'd love to turn this over to Raj, and thank you all for joining today. And Raj, thank you for your time as well.
Thanks so much for having me. These are very unusual times, and we're all doing our best to navigate them. So when I was asked to present, I was just trying to figure out exactly what would be most helpful to schools in Connecticut, and this is what we have come up with here. So I'm going to be essentially sharing 25 recommendations for responsible financial management during these uncertain times. And then share a bit of background with you. Let me see, there it goes. So Charter School Business Management's vision is that one day all charter schools will view and value responsible financial management as vital. There's far too many organizations that see finance as this necessary evil or this annoying thing, or dismiss it as a bit of bookkeeping, and it's far more complex yet understandable than that. Our mission is to empower charter schools with vital knowledge and services to understand and practice responsible financial management. As a company, for our staff, our core values are focused around kindness, accomplishment, respect, motivation, and appreciation. And you see that those letters spell out karma, and we're all about what we call business karma, is doing the right thing by our teammates, by our clients, which is why we have this whole approach of either do the work for our clients or teach them how to do it, or some sort of combination of the two. Our why is essentially 1 in 7 charter schools have been shut down. 80% of these closures are due to financial mismanagement. And this is something that our team of 48 teammates have been solving for the past 14 years. And overall, our purpose is to eradicate financial mismanagement. This, to me, when launching, was a solvable problem that we've been solving for the past decade and a half. So just some notes before getting started. I just want to acknowledge there's webinar fatigue going on, and I know it's all we've got, but it's also hard. So I just want to acknowledge that. And the question always comes up, so I'll just share this up front. Yes, a PDF of the detailed slides and recording will be made available. And feel free to use the slides as a checklist to follow up on the recommendations and decision points that resonated for your school or network. And if any of my recommendations feel like, yeah, we're already doing this, that's good news. Kudos to you for implementing them already. Basically, what my aim is to try to identify something that you aren't already doing, and you may want to consider adding to your arsenal or your tool belt of different options to consider when managing the finances of your charter school or network. So think of the recommendations as if for every one that I'm saying, if you haven't done this already, and only if you agree, because we know that charter schools are very fiercely independent, and there's definitely all sorts of opinions on how to manage finances within your organization. So again, if you haven't done this already, and only if you agree. And then another resource that we won't get into today, but we created this many years ago and we thought it may help. We create several impactful one-pagers, one of which is called 50 Ideas to Raise Revenues, Cut Costs, and Save Time. So that will be sent in the follow-up materials once this is complete. So the agenda, I'm going to go through 25 recommendations. There are going to be 5 around cash management, 5 around budgeting, 5 about financial reporting and forecasting, then 5 around expense reduction, and then a final 5 around saving time and increasing efficiency. So I hope that makes sense, and I'll jump right in. So this is very commonsensical, but some schools don't know this number offhand. So we recommend always knowing how many months of cash you have on hand. You need to know how long or short your runway is, and then based on that time frame, you can take subsequent actions around that. So if you have some emergency, okay, board members or credit line, let's let's tap in. Or we have plenty of cash, okay, we're good for the next 3 months or 6 months, but we got to keep making sure that cash is flowing in. 2, again, if you haven't already, establish a credit line, and if you already have one, increase the amount available. So in the event that you are running low on cash, you need to have some sort of ability to tap in case funding is delayed from the sources, in case what you're expecting is not what's happening, because that's part of these unusual times. So having a source of cash is great. The goal is to have enough to cover 2 payrolls. So then you're essentially buying yourself, a month or so. So check into that. If you have lenders, request flexibility on payment. So we have seen a lot of human responses and really kind responses from many lenders saying, listen, you can, we'll forgive the rent for this month, or don't pay the next couple of months, but we'll tack it on to the tail end of your lease. What can you pay? Let's do a reduced amount and then you make us whole, or we'll just forgive it. There's all different sorts of commonsensical things that are going on. And at the same time, there's some people saying, look, we've got bills too. But if you don't ask, then you definitely won't have any flexibility. So we recommend making the ask. And on a personal note, this was an interesting tidbit. One of my friends said that he was going to approach his mortgage company to refinance his home. And he said, listen, I don't want to go through all the paperwork. Would you just be willing to reduce my percentage? And they said, yes, you know what? It's the right thing to do. We'll knock it down by 1/4 of a point. And I was very surprised. And again, on the professional front or on the personal front, if you ask, you have a shot. And if you don't, you already know the answer. So the next recommendation is to forecast your incoming and outgoing cash to identify future months that may run below zero or dangerously close to zero. So we like to make sure that, kind of back of the envelope, how much on average are you paying per payroll? How much on average are you paying to vendors each month? And how much on average is cash coming in? And then extrapolating that out, if there's some unusual amount of spending, typically at the beginning of the year for the whole year, then do you have enough cash for that? But extrapolating that out, and if you are going to run dangerously close to zero or below it, know that in advance so that you can start collecting the receivables ahead of time or delaying some of your payables. You absolutely cannot delay your payroll, obviously, but it's you can manage your cash very closely if you aren't already. And then if you have cash reserves, now may be the time to dip into them for a percentage where I'm specifying voting that's voted upon by your board, board of trustees, board of directors. And I know that there's restrictions around public dollars versus private dollars, but we don't want school leadership management to just single-handedly decide that, yes, we're going to be at a deficit of 5%. If that's the case and you have no choice, make sure that the board has voted upon that, so it's been blessed, and it's not just coming out of the blue, where you decided and then later management could be held accountable saying, you never got anybody to bless this, or the authorizer comes to you and says, hey, why'd you do this without any blessings? Okay, going on to the next topic of budgeting. We recommend building a budget around your prioritized non-negotiables and have at least 2 versions, if not more than that. So you have to anchor your budget around something. So if you anchor around enrollment, which is very common, do that and have one version at your chartered enrollment, and then look at your historical attrition rate and base your second version of your budget. If you have 10% and you're at 500 kids, 10% attrition rate, okay, let's also do a budget at 450 students at 10% down and see what we would reduce in costs or increase in revenues if you're able to somehow to work on that. You may even have 3 versions of a budget. You may have one version if school is back on track, everybody's there in person, which who knows if that'll happen. This looks different at every state, but you may have one version where it's a hybrid model, where some days in the week, younger students are going in and older ones are working from home or being educated from home. And then you may have a third version that's just all virtual, where we're spending the entire school year, everyone learning from home, everyone teaching from home. So what do those 3 different budgets look like? Another recommendation is to check for unused ESSA funding from your prior fiscal year and try to incorporate those dollars into fiscal year 2021 if you haven't done this already. It's hard enough to get enough dollars into your budget. Definitely don't leave it on the table. We're big on also, similar to how much you need, how much money is going out per month and how much money is coming in per month. Another important figure that we like to know offhand is what's your average dollar amount for the year that you need for contingencies for unplanned emergencies for the past few fiscal years? Is it on average 50 grand? Is it on average 100 grand? If you're a super large school, is it on average 200 grand? You know, what is that dollar amount for the year? So that you can plan for those. You don't know what those emergencies are going to be, but you just have access to that dollar amount and say, I know it's coming. There's that $50,000 surprise that comes every year, but it is what it is. And I know it's coming. I'm baking it into the budget, and I'll put it into the budget for the actual cost, but at least I know I've reserved the money for it. So for those who've applied and received PPP funding, do your best to maximize loan forgiveness. I know our team is doing that for ourselves as well as for all the clients who did apply and received it. It is not easy. I think what's interesting is as much as we all think that we individually are making things up as we go along, it shows that the government is doing the same thing. That everyone is making things up as they go along. So with that, the rules keep changing and you have to stay on top of all the rules, but absolutely do your best to maximize that forgiveness. Ideally, every single dollar is forgiven. But who knows what ends up happening once the submissions are made and the decisions come down from the banks. Okay, and then with expenses, try to create as much stability and humanity as feasible. So what do I mean by that? Right now, if it hasn't happened already, staff are fearing losing their jobs. So they're expecting, and management is expecting and hoping to protect as many jobs as feasible. And you know that most employees cannot handle even a $500 surprise expense. So losing your job can be very traumatic, and if you can protect those jobs, that would be wonderful. One approach we've been recommending with our clients is freezing salaries from your 1920 years to 2021. And if your budget can handle it and you're projecting a surplus, you're having a surplus, at the end of the year, you can do a thank you for staying bonus, you know, for the dollar amount that you would have given as a raise at the beginning of the fiscal year. But being fiscally responsible, you can say, listen, we don't know what's going to happen this year. We're going to be transparent this year about the state of the numbers. And if we are able, we would love to make you whole, but do it when we know that we have the cash, that we have the surplus. We weren't severely under-enrolled, as a lot of people are planning for. So you know, try to make people whole when you can. Also, if you prefer, you absolutely have the right to cut positions, adjust salaries, but then you should prepare for low morale and unexpected departures. And then finally, if you have promised raises and you want to honor that word, then you can anchor your budget around the salaries and then say, okay, these are the salaries we have to sustain. This is the rent that we have to pay. This is all the benefits we have to pay. What is the enrollment we need to sustain this client size with these benefits? And then you can anchor the budget around that as a non-negotiable. So I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to move on to financial reporting and forecasting. So we recommend closing the books, forecasting through fiscal year end on a monthly basis, not on a quarterly basis, because of these times. And if you don't have the capacity, quarterly is better than not forecasting at all. But forecast on an accrual basis, and as I mentioned earlier, on a cash basis as well. So once you've completed those reports and forecasts, then analyze and adapt those actions accordingly. So do you want to save the surplus for the future? Do you want to hire more staff members because you have a surplus? Do you need to part ways with some staff members because you just absolutely cannot afford it? Do you need to fundraise? And does your board have the connections with foundations, with wealthy individuals to fundraise? Should we reduce non-personnel costs? Can we save time, which ultimately saves dollars? So work on that. We also recommend including an enrollment tracker in your monthly reports and forecasts. Pay attention. This is to plan in advance and pay attention to the potential financial impact of being under-enrolled or over-enrolled to plan ahead for the next fiscal year. I know the count comes out in October, and that's what you get paid for the year, but just planning in advance can really save a lot of dollars, which I truly hope this one is one that you're doing already. Establish and monitor key financial ratios and metrics. So knowing healthy and unhealthy levels, and know that there's conversations right now with authorizers around how authorizers should respond. If the authorizers in Connecticut have financial metrics that they're holding you to, you may see a change in that. They may become more lenient, or they may become more strict. It's unclear at this time. They may say, listen, we cannot have a meltdown of the entire charter industry, so therefore we're going to be more lenient on these fiscal measures. Or, you know what, we have to make sure that they stay afloat. We have to be even more with a watchful eye. Just see what this plays out at. We're seeing this in other states of how they should respond to be both supportive yet helpful, which may be aligned and may not be aligned. So just be on top of those metrics, especially the ones that your authorizers require. If you have funders, if you've have an expensive facility and you have loan covenants that you have to satisfy, definitely satisfy those. But then if you have other metrics that you've established yourself, this looks very different school to school. So, and then closely monitor your restricted funding sources. We are, it's so hard enough to get those dollars, and sometimes those dollars have strings attached. If you have a $100,000 grant that has to be used in a certain way and or in a certain time frame, monitor. Out of that $100,000 grant, we only spent 20 grand and we only have a month left to blow through $80,000. That's scary, but you can do it. I'd rather you be on top of those numbers and spend wisely and in advance and in accordance to what you need, instead of, oh, I don't want to lose it, so I just spent it on stuff. Like, it's much better to be very proactive on this and monitor those restricted funding sources in advance. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last two categories. First, expense reduction. If you have part-time work for full-time staff, consider the Connecticut Shared Work Program. It appears in the states that I've looked at, almost every state, I haven't researched every state, but New York has a shared work program. Texas has a shared work program. There's all different states that have this, and I've included the link here. And basically what this means is, in order to try to reduce attrition from your staff, if you say you have 60% work for a full-timer, but you're paying 100% of the cost, this program would allow you to pay your staff 60% of their salary and then they collect 40% of the unemployment dollar amount. So for example, if you get on average $500 a week for unemployment, then 40% of that would be, you get $200. Now I know the math may not work depending on the salaries, but depending on the type of worker, if it's, if it's your hourly staff, if it's roles where this makes financial sense, this is a way you can hang on. Instead of just laying people off, you can match how much work they're actually doing, and making them somewhat whole while filling in the gaps. Now, the good thing about this, which hopefully Congress comes through, the pandemic assistance that you get per week, the $600, which ends July 31st, and hopefully they extend it, that $600 is not prorated. So you get that whole $600 per week through July 31st, and if they extend it, then the combination of that, I think the math works out to be like, if you're making around $57,000 you per year, the math can work out where you can somewhat make people whole for working part-time. Now, I think there's different thresholds. There's a threshold of, I think at least the minimum is 40%, but it is quite an involved thing, but it could provide some relief in your budget, which is why I bring this up. So I researched it extensively in New York. I don't know exactly how it works in Connecticut, but I'm assuming that it works similarly from state to state. So please do your own research. Consider implementing Bill.com or any other service that automates bill pay. There's some schools are so tech averse. They are still cutting checks and printing them and then putting the stamp and putting them in an envelope and mailing them out, and they get lost in the mail, and then you're wasting all sorts of time, and you FedExing a stack of checks to board members to have the second signature for checks that are over a certain dollar amount per your financial policies and procedures manual. You can avoid all that with Bill.com or other services. It's all electronic. It's all uploaded to the cloud. It remembers where you booked that expense the previous time. There's definitely some setup that needs to happen, but we've been encouraged seeing some of our schools implement Bill.com and make their lives a whole lot easier. So meticulously manage your existing supplies and assets. There have been so many times that we've seen schools buying stuff for stuff that they already had. They just didn't know that it was sitting there. They didn't have a good inventory of all their supplies and assets, and they just kept buying. And it's just like, all right, you can do that, but try to go through your existing supplies in advance and know what reorder levels you want to have. So how many boxes of copy paper do you whittle down to before you place another order for 10 more boxes, for example? And if you have any scheduled, we cycle out the 5 oldest laptops each year. If they're working, then don't cycle them out, obviously, and just keep using what's working and only replace the items that need repair or that just keep breaking down. Implement or amplify your staff culture efforts. Turnover is very expensive. So especially these times when we're working from home, there have been team members on our team that just feel so super lonely because they're alone in their apartment, and that's one challenge. And then you have other employees who have families and they're being teacher at home as well as teacher for school, and while working, and it's just a lot. So making those efforts to we have a daily what's on my mind 15 minutes, and if need be it goes to 30 minutes of just let's see each other's faces and let's talk to each other about how we're all doing. We have our office manager who leads it, and she does an awesome job of coming up with a question that everyone thinks about and responds to. We have a social 30 where, we get together at 4:30 every Wednesday, so whatever those culture efforts are, still try to remain connected, if at all possible. And then I know this may or may not be happening in your school, but there's lots of projects, and one of this could be to recoup sales tax that you've already paid. I know in New York State you can, up to a certain age, age of how old that receipt was, you can try to recoup all sales tax that's been paid by going to the sales tax department of Connecticut and say, listen, what's your process? We have employees who do expense reimbursements. They didn't have the sales, tax exempt certificate with them. When they place that order, can we recoup these dollars? That could be a project to, if someone's underutilized, that they can do and potentially recoup money. I know we've done this for clients where they've saved $20,000, $30,000 in recoup dollars, and it cost them, a few grand in labor hours to get that done, and it was worth it. But if you're going to spend $10,000 worth of people time to get $2,000, then it doesn't make financial sense. Federal unemployment tax is another amount that you could get recouped on. There's some payroll providers who have not either at all or initially set up your account properly. And for example, the school I used to work for before launching CSBM had paid $18,000 in federal unemployment taxes, and as a nonprofit, you don't have to pay that. So you can call the IRS, ask under your tax ID number if you've ever paid that in the past, and if they do, they will not only pay you that money back, but they will also give you interest for the duration. So that's what they did back then. So you can try to recoup those funds, and it's worth asking the question. So saving time and increasing efficiency. So we're big fans of creating a fiscal calendar to create transparency, including about like what's due, when is it due, who is it delivered by, and who is it delivered to. There's so many different financial deliverables that are going on, especially during audit season. So having that transparency and laying it all out is helpful in advance, and then it helps hold people accountable. So for example, what we promise our clients is by the third week of the month, by the 21st, we will get you our financial reports and forecasts. You can do whatever date you want. If you want to do it by the 15th, if that's feasible. If you want to do it by the 10th, if that's feasible. I'm just giving you an example. If you do it by the 21st, then the management team has a week to review it, give any feedback that they have, and then it goes to the finance committee of the board by the 28th. So whatever your date is, plus 7 days, plus 5 days, whatever it feels right for you. And then once the finance committee has had the opportunity to look at it, then they send it to the full board of trustees, so that there's transparency, and then there's a process. It's not just what are these numbers and then hashing it all out at the board meeting, which takes a lot of time. If you've done your methodical approach of management first, then finance committee, then full board of trustees, then it only takes about 10 minutes at board meetings. Complete as many what I'm calling someday maybe projects as feasible, or just cross them off the list and say, look, we're choosing not to do these to reduce these stress levels, or we're never going to get around to them. This whole pandemic has, for some people, they've gotten through almost every someday maybe project on their list, and they're so happy. They're like, oh my God, forever I've been wanting to learn this language, or or I've been always wanting to digitize all of our hard copy files. We're doing all sorts of things like that. So this could be an idea for you. Again, it could create work for folks who have have time available, as well as get you more organized. Another thing is to assess whether investing in and implementing technology can reduce staff and or non-personnel related costs. So similar to the example of Bill.com, there are other investments that you can make. I've seen meal tracking software that saved a lot of time. You know, I've seen asset tracking software that can save time when you're doing your annual inventory count for all your assets. There's different things that, you know, schools are notorious for throwing bodies at problems instead of technology at problems. And if you're tech advanced, then that's awesome, but this is something for you to consider. And of course, you have to weigh the cost of what that technology is as a one-time fee, or how much, you know, or if there's recurring costs to it, but just consider it. And then create process maps for clarity on key procedures. So sometimes people get confused about, wait a second, I need to order something. What's the process again? If you lay it out visually, it'll make things a lot easier. Instead of reading, you know, a page or two or three of procedures, just lay out with graphics and say, first step, do blah, blah, blah. And then second step, do something else. So, you know, expense reimbursement, that could be another procedure. You know, there's a lot of different procedures that create confusion and waste people's time. So creating some process maps could clarify. And then last but not least, prepare for your annual audit throughout the fiscal year. There's some schools that are so busy and they do not value finance, and they put one teammate or far fewer teammates than they need to on the finance team, and it's only after the fiscal year is over when they start planning for the audit, and then they realize that either through themselves by doing the audit that they had made mistakes, that they misled the numbers throughout the year, or the auditor finds out that something was going wrong. So if you prepare for your annual audit throughout the year, you can really help save some time and increase efficiency. And ideally, it's only closing June, and then you're ready for the audit. So what could that look like? That looks like bank reconciliations each month, quarterly payroll reconciliations, doing an inventory count of all your assets on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual basis, or you close through March 31st, so you've first closed the first 3 quarters, and now all you have to do to close the fiscal year is the final quarter, quarter 4, and then you get your audit done. So I know I said a lot. I hope some of it, if not all of it, was helpful, and I'm going to move to the questions portion of this and take a sip of water.
Thanks, Raj. This has been super helpful, and I'm glad we had a chance to walk through any of that. I don't believe we have any written questions submitted, but this is the opportunity for folks, now that you've seen the presentation, we can take a minute here or two and see if folks have any questions for Raj. So just give it a minute, see if anything comes in.
And also, if anybody wants to make comments saying, oh yeah, we already do this and this really helps, or if you have suggestions yourself of something that I didn't recommend and you want to just share best practices, please put them in the chat. Help your fellow schools. All of that is very helpful. We all have to stick together.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. Absolutely. Yeah, please feel free. Folks might be reaching for that second and third cup of coffee at this point, you know, like still waking up here. So we can certainly give it another minute or so, see if folks have anything else, comments or questions for Raj and the team. I wonder if I might be able to ask you one, Raj. As we think about upcoming budget changes as a result of the pandemic, what are maybe some ideas or ways that schools could share those ongoing changes with their boards? Like, what's a way to do that? Any suggestions you might have on that?
Yeah, so depending on how your board operates, if there's a norm of sending mass emails or you're meeting regularly every month, definitely make it part of your agenda as a standing agenda item, saying these are the latest changes that are happening. And I would distinguish between what's rumored to happen and what is a change that's actually been administered, and then how do we respond to it. So as things happen, if there's a norm of as soon as it comes out, we're transparent immediately, and then let's give everybody time to think about it, and then we bring it up at the board meeting. And if not, if it's structured and it's like, no, we handle this in committee format and we want to form a committee around this, you can do it in the committee format, and then the committee reports out, or you can hash it out at the board meeting and say, look, these are the latest changes. This is what management recommends. Board members, is there something that's missing that from our thinking? Please guide us as you're in charge of our governance. And, I'm all about the transparency because you never want, there's so much of a world of gotcha right now that, the truth shall set you free, and these are unusual times, and let's just be transparent. But what is that transparency? Then what's the norm? And if not, have a conversation. Maybe this is the time to change your norm. If there's been a norm of we just talk about it at the board meeting, and now board members are feeling nervous saying, hey, listen, we're the fiduciaries on this. We want to change this norm, and we want to know as soon as something happens, or if there's a standing meeting between the head of the school and the board chair, and it's handled there. There's a lot of different options, but and we're big on sharing options. Instead of saying this is one thing you should do, we're just so respectful of all the different ways independently operated schools like to implement things. There's different norms everywhere, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also depends on how it's done across schools and boards. There might be some subcommittees that are very active as compared to full boards. Others may want to discuss it really in full at the board level. I've seen a lot of iterations of that. So it might also depend on sort of how schools are structuring it. But to Raj's point, it might also be a time to ask, is that the best way to be doing it? Could we be doing it differently? So.
That's right.
A question has come in that I want to make sure is clear. And I think you wove some of this into the presentation. In this time of the pandemic, and it might be a little early to see how this is going to ultimately impact in the fall, but what have you seen that maybe stands out to you all in your experience during this time of the pandemic with respect to budget and financials that might be helpful for schools to be thinking about? Maybe just one or two things that you think top of mind, like heading into the fall, schools really should be really thinking about. Maybe it's something you reiterate from the presentation or something just else that comes to mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's very much the human aspect of all of this, right? This has been, I never could have imagined anything like this. So, the few times that I ran into, teammates at the office, and I was like, it is so good to see you, take that time to connect one-on-one, and really appreciate all that we may have taken for granted previously, in we're just rushing around and have to do this and I gotta do that. And, now there's just a whole new mindset about things, and people are really questioning, why am I making this excuse of not going for exercise before my day starts? And it's just a whole just an opportunity to really see each other as we're all human beings. We're all trying to make it in this world, and so the human aspect is one thing that comes to mind. And I think, again, I like to believe it. I don't know if it's happening for sure, but I think for a long time, finance and accounting in general has been kind of dismissed as data entry for bookkeeping, and I think the numbers have a whole new power to them that I've been wanting to happen for years, because it's always been so obvious to me, you know, having grown up in a family business, and the numbers we literally came up from low-income housing ourselves, and like we had the family business that it was make or break, and so I grew up in that, working since age 5. And the numbers, I'm like, why aren't the numbers respected in the way that they should? Why does the U.S. not value teaching financial management properly? Why don't they teach accounting as part of K-12? So I'm hoping that there's those two things, the human aspect and the greater respect for the numbers.
That's great. I think those are ones we're definitely going to want to reflect on. Thank you, Raj. That was helpful. So I think we are all set for questions. If folks, this is last chance to submit any, but Raj, I want to take a moment and thank you so much for your time and presentation today. It's been really helpful. I think, you know, we still, schools will be facing an unprecedented situation come fall, but I do think presentations like this bring us one step closer to some additional understanding as we're trying to grapple all of these topics. So thank you again. I just want to remind folks that this is the last webinar in our July series. We hope that you enjoyed them. But if you have other ideas for content to cover, share them with us, and we'll see what we can do to try to find some good, compelling content for you. And in the meantime, you can see contact information for charter school business management. Again, these folks have seen a lot and can be a great resource for you. So I would say keep Raj's contact information here. This is good to have when those critical questions are coming up. So so with that said, Raj, thank you again. And to the participants, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.